Hi everybody. Yeah, I'm in the same studio, but all of my armies have disappeared and I've taken the opportunity to get rid of my big pine dresser unit that was up here, which was really heavy, and I was just not sure that it was the best way for me to be laying out the armies. It wasted quite a lot of space, so I have put these shelves up. But where have all the toys gone? You may well ask. I had the opportunity to take the dresser down and put these shelves up because I've packed all of my toys into some big blue fruit boxes to take them down to my birthday weekend last weekend. Not that it was my birthday last weekend, it was my birthday a while ago, but we fought the big games for my birthday and Matthew Street's birthday. So happy birthday, Matthew Street, for last weekend. So I thought I would show you some videos of how that went down while I'm finishing putting everything back on these shelves. It was a lot of fun. So let's have a look at what happened. So I hired a village hall for the weekend and got all of my toys out and invited some good buddies from the Old Hammer scene to come and play with the toys. And we had 2 days of gaming. And the first day we laid out 5 tables, and each table was different armies fighting each other, but they all had some impact on the big game that we were going to fight on the second day. We had a table that was some barbarians versus Fimir versus High Elves, and the High Elves, this was a game that in my head was set a long generations before the game that we were going to play on the Sunday. And the High Elves had possession of a particular Chaos Blade, a relic which could not be destroyed, but they had taken it and hidden it to keep it from evil hands in the crypts below a temple. And so they were tasked with guarding it, and there was a barbarian force and a Fimir force trying to capture the blade for themselves, although actually they pretty much just united against the High Elves, so things went very badly for the High Elves. I was sort of expecting that somebody would at least get to the temple midway through the game and then escape with the blade, and then they'd be fighting it out amongst each other for the blade, but that sort of didn't happen. As always, when you create a game for players, the players come up with some quite different things. In this case, the High Elves took the blade to use themselves against the overwhelming foe. So the Elf Lord on his griffin took the blade and flew off with it. And so the other two forces were pretty much united against the High Elves and destroyed them, but it meant that nobody ended up possessing the blade at the end of the game. Had somebody possessed it, if the Fimir had got it, the story would have been that this was a blade that the ancestor of one of the Empire generals in the force on Sunday had destroyed this particular band of Fimir and taken the blade for himself. So they would have had it, and if the barbarians had got it, then one of those barbarians' ancestors would have turned out being the leader of the blue-blooded bandits, one of the skeleton regiments raised by Heinrich Kemmler for the Sunday game, so it would have been on that side. So that was the deciding factor, and nobody ended up with the Chaos Blade. Then we played a game where some orcs had been flushed out of the hills. This is much more recent. In fact, all the other games are much more recent to the events of the Sunday game. Some orcs had been flushed out of the mountains by the Empire force coming northbound from Talabek land, and they had gone down into the forests of Lauren, and the Wood Elves had trapped them there and were determined that none of those orcs should leave the table alive, and they were pretty successful. Only despite the orcs massively outnumbering and outpointing the Wood Elves, the addition of 4 treemen and a dragon, I think, helped. But only one unit of Goblin Wolf Riders managed to make it off the board. So the offshoot of that was that fewer troops were available to the undead forces for the Sunday game, because had the orcs been able to escape from the forest, they'd have gone on into Bretonnia. The border patrols in Britannia would have had to deal with this massive orc incursion, and so Heinrich Kemmler's apprentice would have slipped past them and been able to go on his mission, recruiting 3 vampire lords and potentially a big nasty zombie dragon, depending on how many orc units managed to slip past the Wood Elves. But as there were almost none, none of that was available to the undead players on the Sunday. The next game we played, well, these games were all playing simultaneously, but the next game that was going on was a big dwarf sort of siege game. The story here was that the dwarves had been summoned by the Empire force to provide some artillery backup, but on the morning that they went to leave their stronghold, found that a big sea of greenskins, of night goblins, had arrayed themselves on the opposite side of the valley and were going to try and wipe them out completely. So this was where all of my big night goblin horde, about 5,000 points of night goblins, which is a lot of goblins, are all laid out across this table, which was quite wide, sort of side to side, but quite narrow front to back, because obviously the dwarves have quite low movement rates, and their aim was to get off the opposite side through the goblin line with as many of cannons as possible to support the Empire on Sunday. And they did not manage to get a single cannon off the board. There was a lot of fighting, and the dwarves held their own, but they were massively outnumbered. They broke an awful lot of the goblin line. The goblin, yes, the night goblins not particularly solid in their cool respect. So we were playing 3rd edition, so it's cool, not leadership, for panic and break tests. But yeah, they broke and ran. But on a table that size, the amount of squigs that were bouncing left, right, and centre, and then running amok when their handlers were killed, did far more damage to the dwarf artillery than the night goblins could. So, yep, there was no dwarf artillery made it through, so no dwarves were then available for the siege game for the big game on the Sunday. And the next game that we played was a little skirmish affair. Myself and Chris and Harry were playing this, and this was a halfling village mid-harvest, which was being besieged by trolls from one direction and ogres from the other, trying to make it off with livestock, with cows and sheep and pigs and chickens and corn, and halfling villagers. So the halfling militia were running around trying to herd the livestock off the table whilst providing as much resistance as they could. They fared extremely well against the trolls. Lots of trolls went down, partly thanks to the halfling Wartoise, who was marching around the place stomping on trolls, and partly thanks to lots of failed resurrection or regeneration rolls. I've seen a lot of ones rolled in a game, but that was a bit ridiculous. So yeah, lots of troll deaths occurred. The ogres, which I was playing, fared a little better. They're a little bit tougher. It took them a long time to get to where they needed to get to, but they managed to make it off with a fairly good haul of cattle to feed their clan. But neither the trolls nor the ogres made a significant enough dent in the halfling reserves to impact the game on the Sunday. The halfling farms were still able to preserve most of their livestock and all of their corn, and almost all bar a couple of their peasants, so they were able to provide sufficient food for the Empire army to march. So there was no penalty to the Empire morale on the Sunday game. And then the final game of the Saturday was a valley confrontation, a chaos troop, a Slaneshi troop, and if you know the background to my Slaneshi army from my blog, they're a sort of undercover Slaneshi army, although pretty blatant model wise, and certainly in this case. But the fluff is that they're kind of they're able to be undercover because they're a bit of a sort of sealed state. And they were marching to join forces with the Estalian Inquisition, who formed part of the game on the Sunday. And had they made it to the other side of the valley to join up with the Estalian Inquisition, then the Estalian Inquisition would have turned on the Empire forces halfway through the battle. Meanwhile, from the other side of the valley, the Skaven were coming down. Nordum, defeated from the previous scenario, so the game on Sunday was a follow-up to Vengeance of the Lichmaster. In Vengeance of the Lichmaster, Nordum plays a part, and in my version of events, Nordum is defeated and driven from the field, and Heinrich Kemmler takes control of La Maisontaal. And so Nordum, defeated, goes and finds an army of rebels and outcasts to try and sneak back under La Maisontaal to recover the Arca Chaotis, the Black Ark of the Covenant, which is the powerful warpstone artifact that Kemmler is using to power his undead forces. So they were trying to steal that back via a secret tunnel leading up through the rocks underneath La Maisontaal. The Skaven did an awful lot of damage. The Chaos forces were very much slowed by the amount of armour that was on them, and then slowed even more by the Skaven wizard managing to cast an area of quicksand right in the middle of the battlefield, effectively splitting the Chaos army and making sure that they could only advance in two very narrow columns through the valley, which caused them some big problems, not least running into a bunch of warp fire throwers that took a very heavy toll on them. The Skaven managed to do quite a lot of damage to themselves. Warp fire throwers blowing up, Jezzail's failing, and not least the Screaming Bell, which I ported over 4th edition rules into 3rd edition, but I had a Screaming Bell, so I wanted it on the field. That managed to toll for 2 turns before tearing itself apart and dooming the big unit of clan rats that was around it, pulling it. So, the Skaven did a lot of damage to themselves. Chaos were not able to do a lot of damage to them, but yes, the Skaven managed to get into the tunnel, get the Ark, and flee with it, which would leave Heinrich Kemmler lower on magic points than he would otherwise have been, and the Chaos forces were prevented from making it across the valley, so the Estalian Inquisition would remain on the side of the Empire. So at the end of the first day, everything was pretty much no change for the game on Sunday. The only real impact was Heinrich Kemmler not having access to as many magic points as he would have liked, the Mechanical Warrior not being on the field, all of the other bonus figures that would have been there, and the bonus effects from the other games were pretty much negated. So we moved on after a nice night of drinking to the game on the second day, which was the attempt of this big army from Talabek land to reclaim La Maisontaal, the shrine of their state patron deity, from the hands of Heinrich Kemmler and his Legion of the Undead, which included the skeletal remains of the dead monks of La Maisontaal and the Bretonnian forces of Duke Tancred, who were sent to try and defeat him at the Battle of La Maisontaal. They failed. Those are now undead in the Lichmaster's ranks, plus Krell and Michael Jackson and the characters from the Lichmaster scenario, and the blue-blooded bandits under Adolphus Swemmer, who are the alternative to Krell and his forces in the Warhammer Fantasy Roleplayer Lichmaster campaign. So same series of events, just different character names. And this was on the board that I've been making that you've probably seen, which is a recreation of the board made by Wayne Millard for the third, or as featured in the 3rd edition Warhammer book. So this was the first outing of that board. Great to get it out and be able to play on it. Really happy with how it looked. It was pretty packed full of figures. We ended up having 4 players aside, I think, on that one, which was down from the potential 6 players per side that it got up to at one point. But I'm kind of glad it was, because it was already a bit of a squeeze around an 8x4 table to fit 4 people on each side. And both sides had ups and downs. There was some dismay amongst the undead players when they realised that they would be facing unicorns. But despite the you gave them unicorns, why did you give them unicorns? This is totally unfair. Actually, both unicorns were dead or fled by the end of the game. They proved scarier than they proved effective. Let's put it that way. the undead took a lot of damage early on from cannon fire and missile fire, but as soon as they managed to get to the Empire line, as is the way with undead, the effects of psychology came into play. Even though the Empire side had a couple of banners which negated panic tests, which was useful, and gave them a bonus on failed fear tests. But nevertheless, a lot of the Empire side broke and ran, especially when the middle of the field with some cavalry and the battery of cannons were taken out, and then the ranks sort of started peeling away to either side from that. But the undead did take quite serious losses, and the monks of Maisontaal were completely wiped out by the witch hunters and the Astalian Inquisition without too much hassle. So what was the outcome of the game? Well, I think points-wise it was a fairly conclusive undead win. I think the Empire were so broken that there was no way they were going to recover into a subsequent turn after we abandoned it. But the Maisontaal had also been taken, and the undead ranks had been quite severely reduced. So I'm ruling that yes, undead victory. The Empire forces were pretty routed, but they were able to secure the Maisontaal, and so Kemmler would no longer be able to use that as his stronghold. He was sort of forced back into the wilderness with the remains of his army, trying to find a new base and somewhere else to wreak havoc in the future. And so with the power of television, we are back, and the shelves are full with all the lovely toys, all of which have now been played with, which is exciting, isn't it? I can say I've played with all of the toys that are on these shelves. Hopefully they'll get many more games, but I suspect that they won't all be out. I've now got big enough armies that I can choose bits from, which was the aim. So there it is. I think I'm going to call armies done. I've got a plan for a small Bretonnian warband to do, and a Carnival of Chaos Mordini band. But as far as big armies are concerned, I think this is going to be it. So exciting. Pleased with how it looks. Pleased with how the weekend went. It was lots of fun. Thank you if you were there. If you weren't there, there's a possibility that the table might come up to boil one year for us to play a big game on there. So look out for that. In the meantime, take care, and I shall see you again.